All right, everybody, welcome to this next Facebook Live here for the Usui Reiki Ryoho Support and Community Group. This is an open conversation, it's an open dialogue, and in this current conversation, the conversation here, we're going to be diving in. I'm trying to remember exactly the topic. The topic is the importance of self-healing and self-practice. So we're going to jump deeply into that conversation, really looking at the importance of self-healing and self-practice, and really why it is the main well, I can't say the main cornerstone, but one of the three main aspects of our Reiki practice. So there's a lot to talk about here. And I want to open it with this thought that I think it's a very beautiful discussion with Usui Reiki Ryoho, and it might help to frame the approach that I wanted to explore in regards to our self-healing and self-practice work. And that is the importance of the understanding that Usui Reiki Ryoho has a focus that is beyond healing. It is something that goes a little bit further beyond healing the self. And that idea is to try to cultivate stillness in the self, stillness in the mind and in the body. And, if we do that, then healing becomes a natural byproduct. And I know many of you have been in my classes. You've probably heard this before from me, or maybe you've seen it on my YouTube channel. I think this makes a lot of sense because every night when we go to sleep, we get out of the way of ourself. So my story, Bruce, everything that is, attached to me that I'm carrying forward, those are the anchor points of my suffering. Yet when we sleep, all of those anchor points are gone because Bruce doesn't exist, right? And we know that everybody can probably relate to that. I mean, when we're deeply asleep, you go to sleep and then you wake up the next day. The time in between, unless you're a very vivid dreamer, a lucid dreaming, and all that type of stuff, the time in between is unknown, or it's irrelevant, it's lost, however you would like to say it. It has no context. So if we think about the ability of the body to heal when we're sleeping, I think Reiki helps to shine light on the necessity of dropping those anchors, dropping the anchor points of our suffering. And this is why Usui Reiki Ryoho helps us, I think, to see beyond healing. It helps us to see that there's a trajectory or a goal beyond healing the self because, yes, our form, our mind, our body, uh, our psyche, our energetic form, or whatever you'd like to say, yes, those can definitely be damaged. They can be sick. They can be in need of healing. But our ultimate form, our real self, our daikomyo self, or our spirit, our higher self, whatever you'd like to call it, can't possibly be sick, right? The energy of the universe can't possibly be sick. And we are a part and parcel of the energy of the universe. So if we start to recognize that self work, self healing, and our self practice is helping us to move closer towards daikomyo, and it's helping us to move closer towards our self-actualization. I think we can maybe find some comfort in the idea of letting go healing, or the idea of healing altogether. And this to me is very interesting with Reiki because we have three different aspects of the practice. The first most fundamental aspect of our practice is the recitation of the precepts at morning and at evening. So why I think that is what's not, I think, I mean, this is what people say, is Inamoto talks about it, Japan talk about it as being the core concept. If we're not exuding a life or walking a life in the precepts, being guided by the precepts, being surrounded by the precepts, then we're constantly in a state of suffering because we're in worry or anger, right? Something that we're carrying with us. Even if we seem to be having a good day, we seem to be having a peaceful day or whatever it might be, we might still have those anchor points to the past where somebody wronged you, you have a bad memory, something, a trauma, whatever it might be. So that's either going to be framed in anger or worry. So when we start our day with the recitation of the precepts, it's helping us to remember to let go of those attachments to the past. Somebody was asking me a question just yesterday, actually, that I wanted to start this conversation with. And it's a beautiful, beautifully simple question, but I think quite a complex one to look at. And the question was, how can Reiki heal your past? So how does Reiki help us to heal? And I think such an important question. I know many of you are teachers. You might be teaching classes as well actively. I think this is a talking point that everybody can appreciate. Everybody wants to explore. Everybody wants to understand, because why wouldn't we? We don't want to hold on to all of that baggage, right? We don't want to hold on to our suffering. We hear quite often, buzzwords like inner child work, or, regressive therapy, like when you're going back to your birth, back to your childhood, whatever it might be. And I got to thinking about this, and, with the precepts framing our day, koyodake wa ikaru na shinpaisu na kansha shite gyo hagime ito ni shinsetsu ni. If we frame our day like this, then immediately saying, just for today, I will not anger, and just for today, I will not worry. And instead of those two, I will try to live my life in thankfulness and gratitude and honesty, right? I'll try to live my day like this. Well, then where's the past in that mindset? It doesn't exist, right? And I think, well, I can't say that it doesn't exist, but I think we have to recognize that, how do I want to say this? Because this is a bit difficult to put into words, but we have to recognize, in my opinion anyways, that this current external experience that I'm having right now, I'm speaking to my computer in the countryside of France. I haven't met any of you in person. I'm very grateful for you all showing up all the time and seeing so many familiar faces, right? But I haven't met you in person. And even if I had met you in person, there's still no way for me to concretely and objectively know that it's not just an expression of myself, or an experience uh, that is being understood and being calculated by my own mind. Right? There's no way for me to know. And likewise, there's no way for anybody else. Louise, you're in the top left corner here, so I'll just say for you on my screen, there's no way from, if I was Louise, or from Louise from your frame of reference, there's no way to say that I exist to you, right? I exist as what we've been doing together. We've been working together for quite a long time, right? We've been walking together for a long time. But I might just be a manifestation of a projection to help you along with your journey as it may need to be, right? So when we look at things in this regard, and we think about this came up when I was teaching in Hong Kong, and that's what I'm thinking back to as well. It was a brilliant conversation in the Shimpadin class in Hong Kong. And one of the teacher, or one of the students, was saying, like, this idea, when we are walking through life, the common, like, default mode network of our brain is to believe that everything that we see around us is information coming from the external environment. So I know that might sound like a mouthful. What I mean by that is, if I look outside, then I see the sun setting, I see the trees, I see the garden, I see the part of the house, I see all this type of stuff, right? My mind and my ego in my mind is believing that it is a directional experience going outward. Like, from my mind is seeing and interpreting the external environment outside of the window, for instance. You're listening to me, so your mind is sitting in your body wherever you are, and you're taking in that information from your eyes, you're taking it in from your ears, and our logical or our rational minds is believing that it is that kind of omnidirectional discussion, if that makes sense. You're the center of the universe, and so everything else is coming back to you. Now, what this conversation led, and I've talked about it a couple times in previous videos, but what it led to was, what if we flipped that whole thing? What if everything that I see, so that would be by reflex all of you, by reflex everything that I see outside here, what if everything that is brought to my attention is a mirror of my own suffering? And I don't mean that you are suffering. What I mean is that you are all helping me to understand my suffering. Like, you're here listening to my conversation on this topic. So I hope I'm doing a good job. It's like me auditioning to all of you to say, like, you see what I've learned? I hope it's good enough. I hope it's, correct. I hope it makes sense. When I look outside, when I see the garden, when I see the environment that I live in. That's a reflection of my mindset, of my internal space, if that makes sense. So if we flip the whole conversation, think about it like this. If that sounds a little bit metaphysical, if it sounds a little bit maybe far-fetched, and I can absolutely appreciate that it might, we can probably all remember a day when you just felt like crap, just miserable, right? And you might have been with your friends. You might have been at some amazing party or some park that's super beautiful, or had a day off on your holiday or whatever it might have been. Everybody else around you is having a great time, but you're not. But they're having a great time. So what's going on here? The no matter how beautiful the circumstance is, the person is still feeling miserable on the inside. So it's like, oh, the dinner's not good enough, the sunset's not nice, the da 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 that didn't work. We've all been there, right? Everybody else is having a great time, but there's something inside of us that's not. So why I'm saying all of this is because if we start to recognize this kind of external feedback mechanism of our world coming to us and helping us to see the things that we need to work on in our own self work, our own self practice, then it starts to give us an amazing avenue into the self to release those anchors that we hold on to, if that makes sense, right? If we just have that moment when, yes, you're having a bad day, that's normal. You're human. You're just having a human experience. So if you're having a bad day, if we return to the precepts, then immediately the precepts will help to try to encourage us to not have that bad of a day, to let go, to breathe, take a step back, calm down, de-escalate the situation a little bit. But how do we de-escalate things that we're not even aware of? So what I mean by that is, how do we de-escalate the memories in our subconscious, maybe from childhood or years ago, whatever, doesn't make any difference. How do we de-escalate those things when A, they're not even happening right now, and B, they're just a memory? So this is a really interesting point, I think, and that's why I'm trying to, you know, maneuver in, because it can be quite an abstract way of thinking, I think. But the past doesn't exist. It only exists in our mind, 100%. And even if we can have complete objective reality, or kind of an objective memory on the past, like let's say that it was videotaped, let's say that you could see all of the information from an event, it's still not 100% clear. So we can never be 100% factually in the past. So we're only attaching to the memories of it. And this is where I think self practice and self healing is so critically important. The precepts help us to be reminded. Like, I just had a problem just an hour ago with my website. So, instead of getting frustrated with it, instead of being like, oh my God, it's a lot to run a website and manage it all yourself, and you don't know how to do code and all that. It's a bit of a pain. But getting angry and worrying about it's not going to help. But I'm still human, so I get angry and I still worry about it. But that's a very objective thing. This thing happened on my website. It resulted in this emotional response. And so now I'm pissed off or whatever. Right. So the precepts make logical sense. But what happens when we don't know what we're trying to work on? What happens when, just as a random example, maybe in your childhood, something so inconsequential happened to you, but at that moment, it was a huge deal. Like maybe they didn't have your favorite food at lunch one day and you were super excited about it or whatever, and it ruined your day. Maybe there's still an attachment to that day. Maybe there's still a trauma that we're holding on to. The trauma is a big word. I understand that, but there's still some friction that we're holding on to. I don't think the precepts can help really with that in particular, because in this one moment, we're probably not actively aware or cognizant of that moment in our past, because maybe it was so vague, maybe it was forgotten, maybe it's buried in the subconscious. So we go into the practice to the second aspect of our practice, which is self-healing. And we follow the hand placements, and we allow the hand placements and the tenderness of our touch to bring forward those anchors of the past, the things that our body is still holding on to. It brings forward our attachments and to the resistance that we have. And maybe it helps us to see those resistances with a little bit more clarity. Like maybe when you're 7 years old or 6 years old or four or whatever it might be, maybe that lunch that day, maybe it was your birthday or something, maybe that day was like the biggest deal of your life up until that point. Which I bet we can all I know I can remember that. I know I can remember birthdays. You could probably remember birthdays when you were little as well, a young kid. And you're like, this is it. Life can never get any better than my sixth birthday. Because this is me. I'm turning six. I'm going to get a transformer today. It is going to be incredible. I can't wait. I remember the cake. It wasn't the cake that I wanted, and the transformer wasn't the one I wanted, and my whole universe collapsed. So I'm like, you can't take 6-year-old Bruce, who is now like probably pouting in the corner somewhere, and just be like, yeah, cheer up, champ. It's just you're six. Like, it's really not that big of a deal. At that moment, it's a huge deal. Now we can all laugh at it. We can all smile. I can smile at it. I can laugh at it. But that doesn't change the way that it was then, right? So even if our logical mind can laugh at it and understand that, to me, and I think that this is probably pretty accurate, I can sit here and I might be able to, like when people do inner child work and so on, I can think back to that day. I can smile on it. I can be compassionate to that little boy. I can hold it. I can do all these things that inner child work talks about, right? But all of that is happening in my mind. So my mind thinks that now I understand it wasn't a big deal. Now I can see the little boy in that birthday party. I can send him love and all that type of stuff. But all of that is a function of my mind. Okay. We're not talking about the cellular response. We're not talking about the physical body here really at all. And I think that's what the hand placements do. Instead of me thinking back with how old am I? 44-year-old, am I 44? 44-year-old mind back to when I was six. This is a logical mind. It's an ego-driven mind. Uh, it's a mind that is going to be looking with the quote unquote intelligence of a 44-year-old versus the intelligence of a 6-year-old. I know better than you. You're six. I'm 40. This type of a parental mindset. But look at what the hand placements do. The hand placements take all of that off the table. The hand placements would be as if I, as a 44-year-old, just went back to that birthday and just hugged or just held the 6-year-old, didn't say anything, didn't demand anything, didn't press the issue, didn't try to point out how silly it is that you're upset. None of that stuff is happening in the hand placements. That's so beautiful to me, I think. It's a really beautiful and profound aspect of the practice. We simply hold the heart, we hold the throat, whatever hand placement it is, it doesn't matter. Just for the video, I use the heart usually. We hold here and we just simply let the practice be the practice, right? So if anything comes up, if there's a tension, anxiety, memories, visions, whatever it is, if we can look at the aspect of Usui Reiki Ryoho, and I think this is the great differentiator between Usui Reiki Ryoho, which is Reiki, versus other lines of the practice. If I hold the heart or the hand placements with as much sustained neutrality as I possibly can, and that's a very flexible statement, by the way, right? For me in my practice, I know for sure there's some days where I can hold it for much longer. There's some days where anxiety comes up, pain comes up, whatever, it's not comfortable, whatever. And then that length of time is shortened, right? But if I can hold the heart with as much sustained neutrality as possible, then I might start to recognize that the residue of those memories of the past, because the past doesn't exist. So the residue of the memories of the past are starting to detach in my body. And what I mean by detaching is I'm no longer choosing to hold on to it. Or another way to put it is that my self treatment and my self practice is helping me to further recognize the precepts in myself, in every aspect of myself. Because the memory of that birthday party, the memory of whatever it might be in your life, that memory is still with you because the first two precepts are still being violated. Um, Full stop, right? Full stop. If we are thinking about memories in our childhood where, or it does, childhood doesn't matter, just any memories in your life, in your past, from this moment backward, let's say it just like that, anything in your past. If you are thinking about memories that are happy, that are fluid, that are moving, that are, joyful, that are loving, that are kind, and all those things, then the likelihood of you holding on to those is still there. You can still hold on to it, but the likelihood is far less because you're happy, you're moving with the flow of the energy of all things. You're in a state of flow or a flow state, right? But that memory where somebody wronged you, where it's a trauma, where it was abusive, where it was difficult, where it was whatever, and I bet we all know people like this. Maybe you're like this. I know I used to be like this. I'm sure I'm still am like this in some regards. Those toxic memories are ones that quickly foster conversations of you did this to me, they did this to me, the world did this to me, da 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 da, and it circulates around and around and around. So the anger and the worry is still there and it's feeding on itself. And it's only feeding on itself in the physical body or in the mental space because the past doesn't exist. So I like this idea that the precepts begat the hand placements and the self practice, but then the self practice and the hand placements reinforce the precepts, and they just keep cycling through and through and through. And we need to. You can hear this in yoga, you hear it in Reiki, you hear it in meditation, you hear it all the time that we're a lifelong practitioner, we're lifelong students of the practice because we are always going to be suffering. We're always going to be working on some aspect of ourself that we want to try to improve on or we want to try to make better. The hand placements there, if we're holding that, then hopefully, and I'm thinking about my practice here, when the difficult nature of the practice arises, as it always does, hopefully this helps me to remember the precepts, which helps me to stop that chatter in my mind, which is really the anchor to the past. So, did somebody wrong you in the past? Probably. Are you pissed off with somebody? Probably. Is there some problems in your life that you would like to resolve? Absolutely. Right. But are those things happening to you right here, right now, in this very moment? Probably not. So if they're not happening to you right now in this very moment, then it means the mind and the body is recirculating that same story and it's becoming toxic over and over and over and over and over again. Maybe people who hold on to so many grudges, right? They hold on to so much attachment to the past and it just becomes a toxic cycle of conversation. So the hand placements help us to try to find like, okay, wait, there is that toxicity. There it is. I'm saying the same stories that I've always said. Hold on. Hand placements. What am I doing here? Trying to remain calm. So if the story comes up, and obviously Usui Reiki Ryoho is a Buddhist practice, and there's a statement, and that's not no, hold on, excuse me. It has Buddhist roots. It's not a Buddhist practice, but it has roots in Jodo Shinsho Pure Land Buddhism and these types of things, but it's not a religious practice. But I do like in Buddhism this statement that you can find this liberation if you shine the light of the Buddha in your darkness, which I think means that if you can turn in to that memory of the past, to that anchor point in the past, if you can recognize that it doesn't exist, because this is the only thing that exists right here and right now. The future is a projection and the past is an attachment, always. So, right here, right now, what are you cycling your thoughts on? What are you attaching to? What are we still holding on to, even if we don't know it in our subconscious? Then, when we engage in our self practice, the immediate thing that we think we need to heal, maybe a sprained ankle or whatever it might be, is in many ways a byproduct of the things we're not conscious that we need to let go of. So, if we are sitting in enough stillness, and if we are able to sit with enough peace in our mind and our body, then the origin of our trauma, the origin are the memories, the the ash or the residue of that memory will start to come to the surface and it'll start to be released. And I think that that's a really beautiful way to kind of frame the importance of self practice and why it should be daily. It's like everything else in life in many ways. If we are working on this daily, then we become more accustomed to peace. We become more accustomed to a body and a mind that can recognize peace. If you if you turn on the TV, like I know I can hear it downstairs. I can hear what's being watched down. It's the election results in France, and we've got this big problem, just like in the U.S. right now. The elections are toxic. It's like, which one do you want to? Which terrible candidate do you want to get elect? Like it's just toxicity nonstop. It does. It's just fear and toxicity. So it's going from that to the next thing to the next thing. So we're staying constantly locked in all of that fear, right? And constantly locked in our attachments to the outcome, all these uncertainties. This, if I close my eyes and I hold the body and the mind in stillness, then what do we become? What can we recognize? We can recognize fluidity in life, and we can recognize daikomyo. We can recognize peace. There's so many accounts of people doing this. There's so many accounts of people finding that level of stillness and peace in horrendous circumstances and super stressful circumstances. There's famous stories of monks that mummify themselves, that let themselves meditate to death, do all these types of amazing things, right? And that is finding the light of the Buddha even in our biggest or scariest moments in life. So, when we look at the practice of Usui Reiki Ryoho, starting our day with the precepts and sustaining the precepts with our daily self practice makes a lot of sense. And then we finally see the third aspect of our practice, which is the reiju or the attunement. And I think there's a lot of room for investigation here as to what the attunement means as well. I know many of you have heard me say this before, and probably in the courses or maybe in our private conversations, but I still can't understand how the Reiki world can have a belief that I can attune you to Reiki. I still don't get this widespread belief that would mean that in the course that I just took, that probably took a day or two, I now have the ability to open you up to the entirety of the universe, and I have this magic power, and I can do all these things. I can't see how that is helping the practice. And in Japan, we do Reiju all the time. If you have taken my Shimpuden level, you learn self Reiju, you learn how to work with the attunement process on yourself all the time. And in thinking about these three aspects of our practice for this talk, they fit together in a very beautiful way if we step away from the picture. So what I mean by stepping away from the picture is this facade of daikomyo, the thing that I call Bruce, which is really you, which is really daikomyo. This thing that is called Bruce is suffering because it has form, because it is part of a dualistic environment. It's part of a dualistic experience. And because it is suffering, I'm reminded of the precepts to help me come back away from the continuation of suffering. That's step number one, right? If I can't do that, if I can't, if the precepts are not strong enough for my day of suffering or my moment of suffering, then I have the self treatment, right? I bring my awareness into the self and try to calm all of this down. So then what does it mean that the third aspect of the practice is the attunement? Well, this is my thoughts, but if I abide by the precepts to the best of my ability, and if I'm diligently practicing my own self practice, then after a period of time, whatever it may be, after a period of time, that is going to result in a mind and a body that are more fluid, that are more at peace, that are more in resonance with daikomyo, that are flowing with daikomyo. That's the attunement process. at the end of the day. If we can recognize, even if for a split second, if we can recognize Daikomyo within all of us, if we can feel that level of stillness within our mind and our body, even if it happens just once in your entire life, that's enough. And this is a very common belief in a lot of Buddhist practices. That's enough for you to recognize your own enlightenment because you're at peace. So, this is a really beautiful way, I think, to stack the three aspects of the practice up. Because what are we doing? We're recognizing that we're suffering. And so we're taking a pause from the continuation of this busy mind that is anchored in the past and saying, hold on a second, just for today, I'm going to try to not be angry. I'm going to try to not worry. I'm going to try to be, kind. I'm going to try to be grateful. I'm going to try to be honest and be loving and be supportive and nurturing and do all the other things that exist outside of worry and anger. So if that's not enough, then I'm going to further pull myself away. I'm going to go into the self and try to find meditative peace. And then by doing so, maybe in the stillness that I find and cultivate, I can recognize my own reiju or my own attunement, my own connection to Daikomyo, something higher than our own dualistic suffering. So, and I know this isn't part of the topic here, but then the question, because of this kind of line of thinking, is then, well, what do we do with the attunement? And this is just my thoughts. I know there might be people that disagree with me, and that's fine. But my line of thinking is that, again, going back to this idea that everything that I see is simply a projection of my reality. It's like it's like I'm walking in a 360-degree sphere of mirrors, which is it's like the Truman Show, right? Like the Truman Show is a great example of this. If anybody remembers that movie, he thinks he's absolutely Jim Carrey thinks he's 100% like living his best life, right? Everybody else knows that it's fake. He doesn't realize that it's fake. So if we think about it kind of like that, then I would be Truman and all of you would be characters in that. And this whole thing would be just trying to help me realize my own self-actualization, which, spoiler alert, that's what he realizes at the end, his own self-actualization when he leaves the show and everybody gives him a round of applause and all of that, right? He finally does it. If I can recognize that all of those things are a projection of my own suffering kind of coming back to me, then I need to break that cycle. I need to try to get out of that. I need to try to be at peace with that. So this journey, I think, helps us see that. And so this is the idea then about the reiju, or about this idea of the attunement process. If the person who is coming to me is seated with me and doing an attunement with me, then they're actually a projection of my own internal state. They're part of the reflection of the reality that I'm perceiving. So just like everything else in Reiki, we have to work on quieting down ourselves. So my take on the attunement process is that if I can maintain, a heightened sense of peace and stability and neutrality in my mind and my body, then by proximity, that person might feel the same thing in the attunement process. The spectacle of the attunement might help them find something truer about themselves. I don't want to go further into that really, unless people have questions on it, but because it's a very big topic. But I think it helps to frame this kind of importance of the three aspects of the practice, and then why the attunement at the end, the third aspect, is facilitated by our self practice and by our self healing, because those aspects of the practice help us to recognize Daikomyo inside of the self. Without that, we can't ever recognize it because we're full of suffering. If you think about somebody, maybe somebody who you know quite well or whatever, who's really, really suffering, or maybe you on a bad day. I know for me on bad days, this very, very well and very easily can be me. There's not a lot of there's not a lot of space in those moments in my mind and my body to find Daikomyo because I'm stuck in worry and anger, right? I'm ruminating nonstop. There's stories running through my head that I need to try to calm down. So until those get there, I'm not going to get anywhere, right? But think about, I know this is contrary to this idea that the external world is just a reflection of myself, right? But if I see people and, coming across people who are constantly ruminating in negativity or stuck in that, right? Or just turning on the TV, just turn on the TV and everything's negativity. That's what I was trying to reference earlier. Where's Daikomyo in all of that? Where's the precepts in action? So if we're consuming that and surrounded by it, then it becomes a very difficult space for anybody to recognize their own satori, their own enlightenment. So we take the precepts, then we do the self-treatment, and then we recognize Reiju, and then we come back to the precepts. So it keeps circulating through this whole journey to the self. And I really like, and then please, if anybody has any questions, I really like this understanding that the self-treatment and the self-practice is by definition, hopefully, the I don't know if I can say that it's the full expression of neutrality, but if my hands are over my throat, this is why I'm saying I can't recognize this. Maybe if you wish, you can practice this with me. If you just put your hands around your throat and close your eyes. And I'm choosing the throat here just for the efficacy of the conversation and the sensitivity of the throat. Quite often in Reiki sessions, we don't, or at least I don't, put my hands on people's throats, on my clients' throats, because it's so sensitive, right? We can get so scared and it can trigger a lot of things. Now, if you practice here in your self-practice, this might become agitated very, very quickly. You might notice tightness in the throat. You might notice sensations building up, difficulty breathing, dry throat, whatever it might be. And so, what is our choice here? The neutrality in our hand placements in our self practice would be to try to shine the light of the Buddha or to recognize Daikomyo in that moment. So, if we are sitting here in our self practice, really focusing here, maybe I'm sure all of you can feel the heat, I'm sure you can feel pressure building or some sort of experience, whatever that may look like for you. And at some point, that will probably get quite heavy. At least it does for me. From time to time, it can get very heavy. So I think if we can all remember when it gets heavy to try our best, try our best. That's a very forgiving statement, by the way, but try your best to just recognize Daikomyo a little bit longer, recognize the practice a little bit longer in that moment of tension. Because we don't need to know what's causing the tension. We don't need to know the memory. We don't need to understand the connection to the past because the past doesn't exist. So the real gift in our self-practice is when this residue of the past comes up, the thing that we're still holding on to and carrying with us, when it comes to the surface, it's your opportunity to shine the light of the Buddha, to be neutral, even if it means just one more second. Like, like if you're doing, if you're training for a marathon, I think it's the same example. If you're training for a marathon, then your running schedule increases every day. You get a little bit more fit every single time that you're practicing. So that's what I'm meaning here. You don't need to clear whatever that thing is, the physiological, psychological, mental, whatever it is, the trauma, the baggage that you're holding is not going to be cleared in one session, right? So instead of thinking, okay, I need to be neutral and it needs to go away and all these types of things, when that is there, try to just go a little bit further this time. And then tomorrow or whenever it comes again, try to go a little bit further and a little bit further. And then eventually, I think we might recognize a day where it just doesn't hurt anymore. It's gone. That shouldn't sound so metaphysical. It shouldn't sound so like woo woo and Reiki and all that type of stuff. It shouldn't sound like a conversation, especially I'm saying this for those of you who are teachers. If you bring these things to your students, it shouldn't sound like something that is so out there. When you have a flu, for instance, or a cold, right? It goes in a parabola, like you feel, I'm assuming, right? You wake up, scratchy throat, next day, scratchy throat again at night, a little bit worse. The next day, a little bit worse. Now your nose is, you know what I mean? Like it's getting worse and then it plateaus and then you notice you're getting better. And then the next day you're even better, and the next day you're even better. And one day you wake up, and as soon as you wake up and it's gone, you don't even think about it anymore. So the same exact process is happening here. You hold the body. The precepts were great. Okay, that got me going. My day is really beautiful. So now I'm seated. I'm doing my practice. Wow. Okay, I have no idea what that is, but I'm not. I'm just voicing this, right, for the sake of the conversation. But like, wow, okay, here in my practice, I'm getting a lot of anxiety. My throat's tightening up. Wow, this is really, really difficult. Okay, I'm going to try my best to sit here and follow the precepts. I'm going to try to be grateful, do my work honestly, be kind to all things. I'm going to sit here with this. I can't anymore. I'm done for the day. Okay, perfect. Tomorrow, you might be able to do that a little bit more, and then a little bit longer the next time it comes up, and a little bit longer. And then eventually, like the kind of example I'm giving with the recovery from a cold or a flu, one day you'll do your self practice around that part of the body and it just simply won't be there anymore. So then maybe I know people like this as well. Like even when people, I'm sure many of you know these type of people, right? When they're not sick or when the thing has been healed, when it's been let go of, then as soon as it's like, oh yeah, I had that, right? Like COVID's a great example. Like you come in and like, oh man, I've got COVID. It's pretty easy, pretty mild, but I've got COVID. Oh yeah, I had it. Okay, great. Like, but you don't have it now, so that's an irrelevant statement. It doesn't. You're just attaching to the past. And why I'm saying that is when this hand placement, the second aspect of our practice, when it continues to produce neutrality, there's no. It wouldn't make any sense to just be like, man, I remember like that was real. That used to be. I mean, you can rejoice in the fact that you've healed on it, right? You can rejoice that it's passed on. That's I think fine, but still, no need to do anything. Like we don't need to remember, like, wow, man, a year ago that was really hard because I couldn't even breathe. Because then you're just redigging the attachments to the past. You can be here right now in this thing right now, right? For me, my journey with Reiki, I get asked this question quite a lot. Like, how did it help you? What's the proof? That all these types of things. I don't know if you've seen my bio. I mean, I had all types of health issues. I had health anxiety that could have been certifiable, absolutely. And that's been probably about an 8-year journey, something like that, working on it, working with self treatment, working every day, all the time with Reiki. And absolutely, I can say that I'm not even the same person from here to back there. 100%, absolutely not the same person. But at the same time, there's no need to even think about that except for like, yeah, that's great, but continue your work. Yeah, that's great. You've come a long way, but keep going. You keep going, keep going. So I think there's a space for congratulations and a space to recognize how important the hand placements and the self treatment are. But I think there's also a necessity and a value, or not a value, that's not the right word. There's an importance on understanding that the momentum is forward, not backward. Right. So when we release something, don't attach to it. Keep moving. That's daikomyo. Daikomyo, or the energy of the universe, is not going to, like the sunlight. We can use the sunlight as a great example of the energy of the universe, or as daikomyo. It's coming through space, hitting the atmosphere, warming up the atmosphere, still moving. The atmosphere is warmer, but it's still moving, so it's not stopping. It hits your skin, goes through your body as radiation, right? Goes through the earth, warms up the earth, just keeps going and going and going, changing form all the way. Or water, same way. Like when water is water and then it evaporates and then it becomes rain. In the hydrological cycle, I would doubt that water, and I know this is a bit silly and a bit tongue in cheek, but I would doubt that water would be like, man, isn't it amazing that we're water vapor now? But I really wish we could be water again. Like that would be, remember how great that was? Because that's just suffering. There's no space for that in anything in the natural world except in our mind, if that makes sense. If the kind of analogy that I'm giving here makes sense. When you change, because you're always changing, move with the change instead of the attachment to the past. Instead of, oh man, remember how amazing that thing was. Remember the keep moving with the energy of Daikomyo because it's always moving. And I think that's the crux of the neutrality of the hand placements. That's what they really help us to see. The precepts help bring us into the practice. The hand placements help us find neutrality. I'm sitting here in my practice, doing my best to move with the energy of all things. The energy of all things, the energy of the universe, is constantly changing. I am constantly changing. All of you are constantly changing. Every single billionth of a second that you're alive, you're changing. You're always a different person. So we move with that. And if we're moving in that direction, then where's the attachment to the past? It's either softening or it doesn't exist. And if that's the case, well, then that's how we heal, right? We heal if every aspect of our being can move with as much fluidity as possible into the future as every subsequent moment arises. The self treatment helps us to soften those areas of the body and the mind that are clinging to the past. Like the little boy at the birthday party, the self treatment would be going and holding that little boy in the actual self treatment. But that little boy, if there's residue of that memory, it's still inside of me. So I'm holding my body, which is that body back when I'm 6. If I hold that in neutrality, then in that moment becomes neutrality as well. So then the attachment dissipates and it no longer exists. So we heal. So I've talked for an hour already. I'm a teacher. I love teaching. I love talking, but please let me know. Do you have any questions? Can we open this up to conversation a little bit if anybody has any? You can go ahead and unmute anytime if you want. I can keep going, by the way, as well. No problem. But
I'll go for a quick second.
thanks.
I love how you put all of that. And I think the other way that I think of it is whether you've got big trauma or little trauma, that it sits in your subconscious and your nervous system. So if you're not aware of it and you're behaving certain ways, that you're not even sure why you're doing it, but then using the precepts, like you said, I will not be angry, I will not worry, may not be enough if you're not sure, right? Why you're angry or why you're worried. So you do the self practice, which I love how you said it's like a way of holding yourself. But in that self practice, we know that it calms that nervous system, and which can then calm the subconscious. So all those attachments and those sufferings we can let go of, even if we're not aware of them being there. And then, like you said, bring us back to the precepts. So then from there, I would go to, I am grateful. Because
Mhm.
if you're grateful, if you're in that moment of gratitude, you can't be anything else. You can't be angry. You can't be worried when you're grateful. That's my favorite precept. I always tell people, hold on to that one, right? Because even with your website, like, yeah, you're pissed off, but how grateful are you that you're lucky enough to have a website? And then all that, everything else goes away, right?
Yeah.
So I just love that analogy, really, like you said, it's so complex. It's almost like get really tangled up just trying to sort all that out. But it's so beautiful, that we have that, we are lucky enough that we understand that and that we have that. So we can let go of those attachments, even the attachments that we don't know that we have, which I think is the great part. Because so many people are like, I have to get to the bottom of it. I have to remember what happened. I have to blah, blah, blah. And it's like, you don't. You just have to nurture yourself through this. Let the nervous system and the subconscious just kind of release it. So I love that. That was really beautiful.
You know, Louise, thank you. I love what you just said here. This idea of the attachments that we don't know we have and that we don't even have to worry about that. Like people get caught up, right? This kind of journey with self-healing, it's become, or Reiki and self-work and all these things, right? It's become kind of in therapy and all this type of stuff. It's almost like a badge of resilience in some ways. Like, like oh, I've been going to therapy for 20 years. Well, you need to get a new therapist then. Like that's not something to be proud of. That's not how it works. And why I'm saying all of that is because, like what if we were still, like you're saying, what if you were just fully grateful, existing in gratitude in that moment? 100% full gratitude. Well, then what do you have to get to the bottom of? There's nothing left, right? This is anshin ritsumei is the focus of Usui Reiki Ryoho, this idea that we can live and walk with a mind and a body that is at peace. So if we can do that, then you're fully grateful. Yeah. If you're in full gratitude or full honesty or full kindness or full appreciation, any of the positive aspects of love, right? Then what else is there? If you recognize in yourself practice a moment, even if it's that quick, a moment where everything is still, well, in that moment, what was there to heal? I think that's the big question that differentiates Usui Reiki Ryoho, because it helps us to recognize that the beauty and the expanse of that one moment there. Yeah, I love how you put that, Louise. Thank you. That's fantastic. All right. Anybody else want to add into the conversation? I think there was somebody who else wanted to ask a question.
I'll add in just a little bit. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, Deborah. Thank you very much.
Um, I know there are times for myself when, and for others, depending on how deep the trauma is, that the feeling of gratitude necessarily you can't find it. And I
Mm-hmm.
knew through studying your work, and I'm extremely grateful right now. I can definitely feel it. My heart is fluttering. I can feel that excitement to working with what you are teaching me. But there have been times where I couldn't find it in the past week that I started doing your practices. There was one time that you said, I can't remember what video it is on YouTube, but one of them where you said, just add a smile. So if you can't find the feeling of gratitude, just smiling initiates the physiological response to start to bring that forward. So I just wanted to offer that to anyone. If you can't find those feelings or opening the heart, if you can't do that yet, just adding the actions in your body can bring that up for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you for adding that. That's fantastic. And we maybe have to also be encouraged by what Deborah's saying, because we all will ebb and flow. Well, no, I can't speak for all of you. I I know that I ebb and flow. And so when there's moments where I'm like, yeah, man, that was it. That was total stillness. Everything was in alignment. Well, then why am I not there now? Why? So there are moments where it's like maybe we just need to smile, right? Maybe we just need to come back and recognize that we're all kind of moving through those waves together, right, in ourselves. Hopefully, with more practice, and this is, I think, how it works, but with more diligent practice, then the distance between those moments where we are stuck in anger and worry become bigger, I hope. the 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 solitude or the inescapable feeling of like the amount that we need to let go of should soften. I've said this before. I love this quote from Terence McKenna, who's maybe some people know Terence McKenna's work. He's passed away now, but he was one of the kind of founding fathers of the psychedelic movement in the US. And he's saying this idea that you need to fling yourself into the darkness of the universe to recognize that it was just a featherbed all along. And I love that with Deborah, with your experience, right? Or with your statement here, when you're saying like some days we just need to smile, right? Isn't it so beautiful and so reassuring about the practice that like even on the shittiest days, even on the days where it's just like, man, everything has got you down and everything is weighing on you and everything is coming up and everybody hates you and whatever it is, like the worst, then when you start doing the practice, somehow it just becomes quiet. And I can speak only for myself, I know, but there's so many days where I feel like that type of weight, whatever it might be. Maybe my website crashes and I'm like, I'm just the universe has kicked me a couple too many times today. I'm sick of it. I quit or whatever. Then I go into the practice and immediately it's like, yeah, it's not that bad. It's really not that bad. It's just immediate. I love it. It's immediate. Yeah, it's so beautiful. Smiling, like you said, Deborah. How quick does that work? Boom. Just smile. All right. Does anybody else have any other questions to add or any comments to add? All right. Well, then there's one other point that I wanted to bring across with this. Tying this back to this idea, and I'm still trying to think through it. I'm still trying to figure out how to accurately teach it. But it's that conversation that I was having in Hong Kong. And this idea, again, that I'm pausing so many times. It's so difficult to talk about this because it's oxymoronic what I'm saying. So I want to put that fully out there first and foremost. But as a species, then if we are recognizing all of this stuff coming to us, this is very egotistical, right? Like, I see this, I understand that, I do this, I see all of you, I, all of that stuff, right? If I recognize that everything outside is coming to me because it is a projection of what I need to learn about myself, that's a big flip. It was a big flip in my kind of understanding of the practice. And it's a big, I think, flip in reality. And if we can maybe just bring that back into our practice and into the way that we live our life. If we can, I think this is anshin ritsumei. Anshin ritsumei, again, this idea of walking with a quiet and peaceful mind and body. Well, that would mean that you recognize that anything that is stressing you from your environment is actually an opportunity for you to learn how to release that stress inside your own mind and body. Because in reality, that's the only place that it's taking place, anyways. Right? If you see that anything that's pissing you off from the external world is actually just in your mind. So anything that you're remembering from your past is actually just in your mind. Anything that is making you stressed is actually just in your mind. The external world is just helping you to get to that thing that you're still holding on to. Because otherwise, it wouldn't stress you out. That's the example I was giving earlier when, like, everybody's on vacation and I'm having a miserable day, so the vacation's terrible. Well, if the person next to me is having the best day of their vacation, then that doesn't make any sense. The problem has to be here. So if we can recognize this as anshin ritsumei and recognize that this is a beautiful feedback mechanism of daikomyo, it's like the universe is cheering you on to try to figure out the things that are keeping you from recognizing you are the universe. Right? Which is really beautiful. It's really reassuring. It's like you've got this huge fan club all around you that's like, oh, Bruce, you're doing so good. You're doing a great job, but you still need to work on these things. But so because you have free choice and because we can't interfere and all of that, we're going to give you little clues of what you need to work on. And if you have a more peaceful mind and body, then you're going to recognize those clues as not circumstantial or not coincidental or not random. And you're going to internalize it and work on yourself. And when you do, then the whole universe becomes more at peace because you are the whole universe. It flips the way that Reiki is quite often taught and practiced if we look at it like this. Because it's just a practice of you. It's just a practice of going into yourself. Precepts, hand placements, raise you. That's it. Nobody else, nothing external, just internal. And if it's too hard, like Deborah said, then just smile. Right? And when that smile kicks in, when it works, then you recognize what Louise was talking about, the gratitude. And if you recognize gratitude and you're smiling from your heart, well, then where's the friction? But if we're recognizing Reiki as a practice of, I'm going to do this to the external world, I do this to you, I do this to it, then there's friction. So this is what I love so much about being in Japan. It's what I love so much about going there on my tours and all these types of things, is that we see it full on. We see it 100% of the time. The monks and the priests and the people that we talk to, the priest at Mount Karama was talking about this. And maybe some of you have heard me say this in the new videos and things, but when we were there, he was so profound because he was like, we don't come to this mountain to worship the mountain or Usui sensei or to practice Reiki or anything. We come here to listen. Just listen. Go on to the mountain and just listen. How different is that How different is that conversation than how these things are almost always taught? It's 180 degrees different, right? We practice Reiki to listen until we hear silence. That's what I think we do. That's why the hand placements are so beautiful, because they hope to remind us that silence is a choice, the same as noise, the same as chaos, the same as attachment. That's a choice as well. So, which choice do we want? The precepts show us that it's a choice, right? You have a choice. I choose that just for this day, today, right now, I will not be angry. That's a choice. It's an expression of choice and existence that we are choosing right now, right here. So if that's the case, then I'm going to sit down and do my practice. I'm going to choose to do my practice, and I'm going to choose to work towards stability and neutrality in that practice. I'm going to listen, not talk, not teach, not spread, not push, not cleanse, not balance, not nothing, just listen. So when that little boy from the 6-year-old birthday party comes up and is pissed off because he didn't get the transformer that he wanted, then you just listen and hold. And eventually, that little boy will probably run out of reasons to be pissed off, right? That's how it works, that's how the healing works. All right. So, any last questions or comments or statements or anything that anybody would like to share? Well, then, I hope this is beneficial. I know that, again, like I've been saying, many of you I know are teaching. I hope it's helping your practice. I hope these ideas that you can see I'm thinking these off the top of my head, right? So I'm not scripting these. So I hope as I stumble through this conversation that it's been beneficial for you. From my heart to yours, really thank you with every bit of gratitude that I have for being here in this conversation. It's so nice to see all of you today, and it's so nice to see all of you who are tuning in on the recording as well. So I hope it's beneficial to your practice, everybody. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. So, as always, be well to each and every one of you, and In Gassho to all. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you very soon. Bye, everybody. Take care.